Start?
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good morning, everyone. So I would like to welcome everybody to our first graduate student conference organized by İSİFAM. Thank you for being with us and joining us. So taking advantage of this occasion, I would first say a few words about Istanbul University Center for Islamic Economics and Finance, İSİFAM, and what we are trying to accomplish with the Graduate Student Symposium. Before I hand over the floor to Professor Mabit Al-Jarhi. So Istanbul University Center for Islamic Economics and Finance aims to develop a sound understanding for the genuine perspective that Islam brought to all economic activities and to organize activities for the implementation of this understanding. So İSİFAM was established in 2016 by the faculty members from Istanbul University who have in-depth interest in the field of Islamic economics and finance. So the center is based on a multidisciplinary manner as it includes academics from several faculties and departments such as economics, divinity, finance, accounting, sociology, law, and business administration. So İSİFAM basically aims to contribute the development of theory and practice of Islamic economics and finance, realizing the effectiveness and efficiency in the industry, and increasing the awareness and consciousness of the society in this regard. The center's main activities include various academic and industrial studies, projects, education, training, and meetings to realize its goals. The center, in a sense, functions as an information and proposal provider to all the stakeholders of the system, including the regulatory bodies, financial institutions, investors, entrepreneurs, and academia. Over the past 4 or 5 years since it is founding, İSİFAM has brought together a number of activities on issues pertaining to Islamic economics and finance. By organizing different types of activities, we are trying to create more awareness in the field of Islamic economics and finance. The International Islamic Economics and Finance Graduate Student Symposium is one of them and seeks to bring master's and PhD students together from a diverse range of perspectives and disciplines, converging around the theme of Islamic economics and finance. So we hope to provide an opportunity for interactive and interdisciplinary engagement, aiming to make the researchers research and ideas more qualified. Of course, one of the goals of the symposium is to raise interaction and integration among the Islamic economics and finance scholars, researchers, students, in order to lay ground for the exchange of knowledge, experience, and cooperation. We initially were planning to have an offline symposium, but because of the COVID-19, we are not able to make it a face-to-face program. It will be a kind of new experiment and experience in crisis management to give our followers, students, colleagues, an opportunity to participate, follow, and exchange ideas. So we are trying to bring together through our symposium a platform for discussion on issues that pertain to all of us. Graduate conferences are very important to me because graduate school is not primarily about the classroom. Some of our most important learning and skill development will actually occur off campus. We attend seminars at other campuses or at institutions, listen to talks by other scholars. Perhaps most importantly, we participate in professional conferences in our disciplines. Ideally, we might be attending to present our own research or to serve as a discussant on someone else's work. But even if we are there just as an attendee, the importance of academic conferences for graduate students looking to get a job or have a successful academic career is undeniable. So if we as graduate students have a chance to present our work at a conference, the benefits might be obvious. This is an opportunity for us to showcase our work to others in the field. These might include senior colleagues who could be the source of further opportunities, including jobs. Presenting research is also a chance to get feedback from colleagues. Too often, graduate students are used to seeing criticism from others as connected to a poorer grade. But in the context of becoming a professional academic, such criticism should be treated as a compliment. Someone thought our work was worth reading and discussing, providing us with valuable insight on how to improve our work. Whether or not we are actually presenting our work, professional conferences are opportunities to observe the top-level scholars in our field, as we will listen Professor Jarhi today. Please try to attend plenary talks, watch how your colleagues do their work and how they present it. This is a great occasion to learn how to improve your own content and how the ways you convey it. By attending other presentations, you will learn from others and improve your own skills and knowledge about your field. It's also important to engage with their work, ask questions, and perhaps go and see them after the panel. But unfortunately, we cannot do it now, but in the future programs, we will do it, inshallah. You should also make comments and criticism and ask well-informed questions. Use such comments and criticism to show that you want to help make the presenters work better. And also by asking a question, you show that you want to be part of the disciplinary conversation. So before I hand over the floor to Professor Mabit Al-Jarhi, I would like to thank some colleagues and students who did tremendous efforts to overcome many issues and to make this event running smoothly. Especially thanks to Batuhan Buğra Akartepe, Ahmet Faruk Şener, Taha Kara, and Esra Balcı. They have worked very hard and well to make that happen. And thanks to Vasfi Akdeniz, Abdurrahman Yıldırım, and the organizing committee, Istanbul University, İSİFAM Board of Directors, to give us to have such an important event. Of course, special thanks to all participants, chairman and discussants from all over the world, and our keynote speaker, Professor Mabit Al-Jarhi, who has contributed extensively to various fields of Islamic economics. He has a BA from Cairo University, MA from University of Illinois, graduate resident studies, UCLA, and PhD, University of Southern California. He has also written on the subject of Islamic economics in a number of publications. He is invited to give his insight into the field of Islamic economics and finance in many countries and conferences. He is currently teaching at Ankara Social Sciences University and International Center for Islamic Economics and Finance. He was awarded by Islamic Development Bank Prize in Islamic Economics, Banking and Finance for the year 2019. Today, he will give his keynote speech on the challenges of studying Islamic economics and finance. So I would like to turn over the floor to Professor Mabit Al-Jarhi. Welcome, Professor Jarhi. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Najmuddin. Actually, your introduction your introducing me alludes to the fact that I am an very old person, which is a fact and also a responsibility. I would first of all, Alhamdulillah, الذي يرفع الذين آمنوا والذين أوتوا العلم درجات ويجعل التقوى سبيلا لمعرفة ما في الكون من آيات، والصلاة والسلام على معلمنا وقدوتنا وأسوتنا الذي استعاذ بالله من علم لا ينفع ومن قلب لا يخشع، وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم على الصراط المستقيم والنهج القويم رواد العلوم النافعة والعقول البارعة. Distinguished guests and learned audience, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are most grateful for this episode of a highly distinguished conference. Thanks to the distinguished organizers and to the hard-working staff that executed the conference and the conference details with energetic clockwork. I would like to share with you some ideas about the challenges we face in learning and teaching Islamic economics to the forthcoming third generation of Islamic economists who are obviously present in this forum. Starting with the teaching side, the first and most obvious challenge is to develop Islamic economics not as part of Sharia, but rather as a part of the discipline of economics. Obviously, Islamic economics rejects a good part of the new classical methodology. However, it remains as non-textual science that uses deduction and induction in the traditions of Ibn Rushd. It is so our scientific method starts with Ibn Rushd. It is a positive science only in this limited sense. In other words, we are not claiming that we have a positive science in the sense that it is free from moral values, but we are saying that we use deduction and induction. We use the scientific method that was pioneered by Ibn Rushd. However, it holds Islamic economics hold on to the Islamic values and does not claim to be value-free, like the false claim of neoclassical economics. We are much more honest than the neoclassics. We do not claim that we are value-free. They are not value-free either, but they claim the opposite. This is a serious challenge. The reason is that early pioneers who wrote in Islamic economics had some Sharia background, but were not trained as economists, remembering that Sharia is a textual discipline that starts with verifying, then interpreting the divine text, from which it aims to draw its rules. Such textual method or methodology dominated Islamic finance since the middle of the last century. Finally, when the departments and centers of Islamic economics were to be established, they were assigned to Sharia and Islamic studies departments. This is now a significant challenge. We need first to switch to the positive approach and place Islamic economics into economics departments. Another challenge that branches out is that students of Islamic economics are not sufficiently trained in quantitative economics. That is mathematical economics and econometrics. This calls for a redesign of curricula A third challenge is that in countries where Islamic finance has been practiced, very little Islamic economics has found its way to application. A dichotomy between economic policy in our countries and Islamic economics has arisen and needs to be remedied. On the teaching side, and just to assure you, we teaching economics have more challenging than those who are learning Islamic economics. So on the teaching side, most economists who can be candidates for teaching Islamic economics have been trained in neoclassical economics, albeit with some sympathy to Keynes. Western economics in general had a theory of the rate of interest based on liquidity preference or loanable funds. It insisted on trade-offs between equity and efficiency. Only at times of a crisis, fiscal policies become counter-cyclically expansionary. Institutions like Zakah and Awqaf are absent. This has been a clear sign that Islamic economists can borrow little from conventional economics except for the general approach. We have been stuck to the textual methodology inherited from fiqh and adopted by our pioneers. And as we grow to find our analytical approach, most of our writings have been bogged down on questions of methodology that for more than 50 years we should have crossed this stage after a few years. But the vicious cycle continues. When we speak about an Islamic economic system, we sound like describing a dream whose details are getting opaquer over time. The few various attempts to describe an Islamic economic system have been generally ignored. Western-trained Islamic economists have just started to roll up their sleeves to confront these challenges. Meanwhile, students of Islamic economics started working for academic degrees offered mostly by departments of Islamic studies in many countries. Rarely can we see that some departments of economics offering similar programs. That strongly indicated the little awareness of the subtleties of Islamic economics by our academicians and policymakers. Such an environment, which is hardly suited to the establishment of an Islamic economic system, would call for serious thinking. While many of us were involved in following the textual approach, fewer others have opted to building up the discipline of analytical economics. Such efforts have not been spent for just meeting the intellectual challenge, but rather to prepare the third generation of Islamic economists who can use the language of economics to carry out a dialogue with Western educated economists and policymakers in our countries, as well as with Western economists. The difficulties encountered by this endeavor is that some Islamic economists, even those educated in Western schools, have adopted or have developed a spirit of total rejection of conventional economics to the extent that they wanted to lock their talent into textual writing and to stay out of economic analysis. They became a close clone of Sharia rather than economic scholars. Some centers of learning in the West created chairs in Islamic economics occupied by Orientalists, whose main approach has been to criticize Islam through the behavior and current status of Muslims. This served to create serious doubts in our students' minds. Surprisingly, such centers have been generously financed by some Muslim countries, and this is very unfortunate. Thus, such a situation provides both challenges and opportunities. I intend to present you some ideas on how to confront the former and benefit from the latter. Hopefully, we can start a dialogue about an effective plan for education in Islamic economics. At first, we have to meet head-on our utmost challenge to convince economists of the necessity to reform the new classical economics. It has been difficult to construct Islamic economic theories using supply and demand analysis, when this analysis is basically faulty. Here, we face a question: what's wrong with the new classical economics? We can record three objections, and these objections are only examples. The objections to new classical economics can take books, not just few remarks in a speech like this. First, the new classical methodology insists upon an unboundedly rational Homo economicus, who has a calculative power that exceeds by far the fastest supercomputer that would probably exist within decades, with an exacting preference ordering of all commodities. Notice that all commodities that would ever exist. It can compare all combinations of such enormous number of commodities and can decide which ones are preferred to others. With straightforward consistency, it seeks to maximize wealth, utility, and profits. In other words, the superhuman is also extremely materialistic. We object to the hasty and imprecise way of aggregation done by the new classical theory. This is a very serious defect of the new classical economics. So we object to it from the individual, when they aggregate from the individual to the market and then to the whole economy. The horizontal summation of individual demand curves into a market demand curve requires the SMD conditions, the Sonnenschein, Mantel, Debreu conditions, which even when fulfilled would render the aggregation trivial. The new classical belief in strong reductionism is associated with the argument for the micro foundation of macroeconomics. The new classics are still unaware that Poincaré in 1899 has discredited strong reductionism by showing that it was impossible to predict the behavior of a solar system with more than one planet. Yet to them, the consumption function, for example, would be a simple summation of the individual demands for consumption goods. Their typically hurried aggregation fills the received doctrine with falsehoods, making it impossible to use as a basis for useful and realistic analysis. Another example of the new classical folly is their implicit aggregation related to the theory of the rate of interest. I chose this point because, most of us economists accept the theory of the rate of interest and take it for granted. But I would like to show you that this is a very wrong theory. The claim that there is an equilibrium rate of interest by the new classics or by Keynes cannot be supported. The received doctrine starts with the universally accepted concept of time preference that causes a premium of present over future commodities, justifying a higher price for deferred than for spot payment. This is simply a reflection of the urgency of consuming a commodity now rather than later. The received doctrine jumps directly to a time preference in money, which is reflected as an equilibrium interest rate, either through the liquidity preference or the loanable funds theory. This is the theory that Islamic economists should have disproved from the very beginning. The jump from the commodity time preference to the money interest rate has never been justified, except in a way similar to the Sonnenheim Mantel-Debrow condition, which renders trivial aggregation. To show the falsehood of the theory of interest, let us start with few axioms. First, people are mortal with unpredictable lifespans, making present consumption more certain than future consumption. Second, every individual has a different rate of time preference for each commodity. Third, such rates would change with income and relative prices. Fourth, the rate of time preference for any commodity is different for different individuals. So these axioms cannot be rejected by any means. The new classics, starting with Irving Fisher, would have us believe that the rate of interest is some weighted average of the rates of time preference summed for all commodities and all individuals. We can only guess that the weights here would be either prices or quantities consumed. That is where the new classical folly lies. There is no relationship between the time preference of a commodity and its price. Bread, for example, for a lower income group commands a high rate of time preference or urgency, but has a low price. Driving a Rolls Royce for an hour, in contrast, would have a much lower rate of time preference, but with a much higher price. So remembering that we can consider monetary balances as equal to the total value of traded commodities, as in the quantity equation, but prices in this equation have no relationship with the rates of time preference of their corresponding commodities. In other words, the concept of commodity time preference cannot be projected into an equilibrium rate of rate of interest for money. The only exception is the remote case of people having the same intertemporal preferences for each commodity, which do not change with income, so that aggregation would be acceptable, but equally trivial, because this is the world of one individual and one commodity. Very unrealistic. Therefore, the set of rates of time preference cannot be mapped into one interest rate for money. We have therefore demolished the neoclassical as well as the Keynesian theory of interest. Of course, in an Islamic economics class, we get into the mathematics of this concept and how the theory is falsified. The observed rate of interest merely an administered price for money imposed by the monetary authority or the banking system as a whole. Surprisingly, this administered price is the anchor of monetary policy everywhere, even in Muslim countries. It's a simple consequence of money being issued and allocated based on lending. Remember, we do not issue money except on the basis of lending. Should we switch to a system in which money is issued and allocated based on investment, as it should be in an Islamic economic system. The system would have a rate of return on equity-based financial assets that is market determined. Time preference would be reflected in markups and rental charges attached to the sale of ijara. It would also be reflected in investment allocation to different outlets. So besides neoclassical economics often commits analytical errors. A case in the concept of perfect competition, defined through a perception of an atomistic market, where the quantity bought of an individual household, as well as the quantity sold or offered for sale by a firm on the supply side, is infinitesimally small. Neither consumer nor producers can influence the price. Everyone is a price taker. Al-Khwarizmi, in his grave, would react in horror to the neoclassical sleight of hand that equates the zero with an infinitesimally small amount. They are two different things. If quantities demanded by households and quantities supplied by firms are not zeros, but infinitesimally small, then each would have some influence on price. Price taking would therefore become a myth. The same fallacy is conspicuous when the neoclassics claim that profits would be maximized when each firm equates price to marginal cost. This is another fallacy. This must warn us about the type of mathematics used by neoclassical economists. One must become suspicious of the way math is taught by economists and not mathematicians. Our third generation deserves to have a correct understanding of mathematical concepts and avoid haphazard conceptualizations. That's why I strongly advise that math should be taught to economists by mathematicians and not by mathematical economists or econometricians. Perhaps the worst fault of conventional economics is in its insistence on a stable equilibrium. Market capitalism has witnessed repeated crises during the last 150 years. Islamic analytical economics must adopt an approach based on this equilibrium, leaving behind the perfect neoclassical model. So this equilibrium is a myth, and we live in a world of disequilibrium, and we must do our analysis in such disequilibrium framework. Remember the law of diminishing returns, one of the sources of pride of neoclassical economists. It is no law at all. The armchair thinking of economists assume that factories or production units are designed with no excess capacity. This is something that engineers would vehemently deny. When factories are designed, they include a significant portion of excess capacity. Therefore, economists must admit that diminishing returns are neither theoretically nor empirically correct. We can go on and on, detailing our strong objections to the received doctrine. Meanwhile, we do not have to repeat the obvious reservations about its methodology. We only need to dig deep enough in neoclassical economics to expose its analytical weaknesses. The third generation of Islamic economists should be spared going through classes with this material. In particular, our Islamic economics curriculum must contain at least one course on the critique of conventional economics that surveys the ideas of John Robinson, Straffa, Keynes, Keane, and others. So we don't teach neoclassical economics, but we teach the critique to this type of economics. Besides, we need to rewrite the history of economic thought to place Al-Shaybani who lived in the 8th century as the father of economics. You see, Shaybani wrote the first book in microeconomics. And Ibn Khaldun in the 14th century as the father of analytical economics. Instead of, we cannot remain indifferent while Westerners crown some 18th century economists in their place. We also need to rewrite the theories of consumers and producers' behavior using price searching and relying on this equilibrium analysis. Transactions prohibited by Sharia can be grouped can be grouped under the nomenclature of nominal transactions. They have seriously negative effects on the speeds of adjustments and market mechanism. Of course, these nominal transactions are mainly debt and pure risk trading, and they are prohibited by Sharia. In contrast to the real transactions that are allowed by Sharia. In this manner, we can provide an economic rationale for every prohibition or permission found in Islamic economics. We should have no worries that we may be unable to rationalize. Ibn Rushd has postulated a long time ago that there could be no contradiction between science and religion. The fear of such contradiction has made Westerners separate their myth-based religion from state. We have every reason to keep our intellectually consistent religion and our state inseparable. My textbook, Economic Analysis and Islamic Perspective, is being composed along with these ideas. The first volume is freely available online. The second volume is coming out very slowly due to the painful process of writing new material. It will also be made freely accessible. I wish to make it as part of a graduate program in Islamic economics. The program would be open to students regardless of their undergraduate specialization, provided they satisfy prerequisites in math, physics, statistics, and software programming. And let's make sure that our Islamic economic students have this background: math, physics, statistics, and software programming. It would contain courses on the critique of neoclassical economics, Islamic finance, the economics of Islamic finance, history of economic thought, both conventional and Islamic. Mathematical tools would be taught by mathematicians with an attempt to reform the theorems of Samuelson and De Bro using proper mathematics. Econometrics would be taught by mathematical statisticians. This program would hopefully produce Islamic economists with impeccable abilities who can have a lively dialogue with both Western economists and our policymakers. No doubt, the message of Islamic economics is being carried out everywhere. Yet, it is time to evaluate the efforts in this field for their recalibration. We must set our eyes on the coming generation. Its preparation should be our priority. We need some urgent and bold steps. First, let's move to the Islamic economics programs, 2 departments. Let's move the Islamic economics programs to departments of Islamic economics. Second, let us agree on a viable graduate program paralleled by a similar program in Islamic finance. Third, we must set our goal as to produce bearers of graduate degrees who can readily work in business enterprises, government institutions, and in policy making. Their minds must be free from the follies of the received doctrine. They must aim at reforming both economics and the economic system. That's my message today. I'd like to thank you again and thanks the organization as well as the young men and women who strived to execute this symposium with utmost precision. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Jarhi, for your inspiring talk. Most of our audience and participants are either graduate students or junior scholars who are in very early career of their academic life, and we all benefit from your experience and long-time experience in the field of Islamic economics, and your talk was very inspiring for all of us. We have around 10 minutes. We can get some questions from our colleagues and audience. I think if you have any question, please raise your hand and ask to Professor Jarhi, and we have a chance to listen him more, like 10 minutes. Any questions? Let me check. Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay, let me ask a question, Professor Jarhi. Thank you again for your talk. I'm wondering, so you talk about your book, and we will be happy to have it and use it in our classrooms as a textbook. I'm wondering how you understand or interpret the classical Islamic law heritage and bring it to into the modern context. So it is one of the main difficult issues that we are facing today. We have a long ages experience of Islamic scholarly tradition, and we either ignore this tradition or just transfer the knowledge of 1,000 or 500 years ago, and give some opinion or issue fatwas based on this concrete solution of their time. So it is one of the main challenge. We, on the one hand, we want to use these sources. On the other hand, we cannot contextualize their ideas. So what do you think, or what do you want to say about this challenge and this issue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for this. You see, Dr. Najmuddin, we have a role as an Islamic economist to play in this particular Sharia part. You see, our Sharia scholars would not deny that they are looking for validity. That from the economic point of view, we have transactions. Are these transactions valid or not valid? On what basis do they do that? Validity has two sides. Formal validity, in other words, the transaction is done according to a contract, and this contract has certain conditions. For example, a sale contract must have a buyer, seller, a commodity, a price, etc. And the other part is is validity of purpose. So it might be halal to sell grapes, but it is not halal to sell grapes to make wine. The validity of purpose depends on the ultimate consequence, or what is called in Arabic or Sharia al-ma'alat. So who understands ma'alat? Of course, some Sharia scholars claim that they know these ma'alat and they attempt to discuss them, which is a good trial. But we economists know more about the consequences of economic actions than Sharia scholars. And the Sharia rules will not be complete without our effort as economists. That's why, you know, one of the strange examples that you go to a bank, participation bank in Turkey, or an Islamic bank in any other country, and you will find that the Sharia board members are all Sharia scholars. Why? Do Sharia scholars understand monetary and financial transactions and their consequences? Of course not. So the majority of those boards should be Islamic economists who know more about monetary and financial economics and can decide about the ultimate consequences or the validity, so that the two pillars of being halal or permissible are there, are economists. So we need actually a revolution in our system and in our understanding to set the role of Islamic economics, to redefine our role in a way that would make Islamic economics more solid. Of course, we are not going to derive Sharia rules. This is the job of Sharia scholars. But we can tell them that, yes, if you allow the financing of the acquisition of shares in the financial market for a short time, we know that, as economists, we know that this is called speculation, destabilizing speculation, and this is a Ponzi scheme. So if you Sharia scholars find this to be formally valid, we will tell you that it is not valid in purpose, and we have to say that this is haram, although it may be seen by some Sharia scholars as halal. And there are many examples in Islamic finance and in trade and economic activities that lack this validity of purpose.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Dr. Sabri.
Thank you, Professor Najmuddin. Thank you very much, Professor Al-Jarhi, for very informative talk. Referring again to the textbook and that should be taught or having a curriculum in the class for Islamic finance students. We know that one of key challenges is the standardization in Islamic financial industry. So my question will be related to the curriculum. Is it wise to propose like united curriculum, or one of the curriculum that could be used into all classes in terms of when it comes to the difference between the school of thoughts, Islamic school of thoughts? Is it wise? Can this be applied from different perspectives? So I would like to hear your view on this.
I would rather try to strike a balance between variety and homogeneity. Yes, the body of analytical Islamic economics that we teach should be almost the same. But there are people who might be more interested in Islamic finance rather than Islamic economics. There are some people who would be more interested in policy issues and how the Islamic economic system is structured, how to conduct monetary and fiscal policy in Islamic economics, how to make policies that confront crisis and so on. There are people who might be interested in the history of economic thought, and they might study the ideas of Ibn Khaldun or Shaybani in detail. Yeah, that's fine. So we must allow a high degree of variety, but we must, as far as the analytical ideas, each Islamic economist should know why the price theory is false and what is the alternative, why the rate of interest or the interest rate theory is false. I'm talking about economically false. I'm not talking about the ideas of justice, which are valid, but which are also offered by Sharia scholars. But we economists, we have more merchandise to offer as far as economic analysis is concerned. So we must all also have some ideas about how how the financial markets look into Islamic economics. What kind of transactions are allowed and not allowed? What the role of the central bank would be? What the role of the regulator, and so on. So there are certain basic parts which must be common to all of us, common knowledge. Just like Islam, there are certain parts of Islam that everybody must know, and if you don't know them, then you better learn them as quickly as possible. This is in order to be a Muslim. A Muslim is not an imitator. He has the basic parts of his religion in his mind. So Oslo Islamic economics, we have that. We must have this common basic part, but we can have variety of interest, and we can have variety of schools. But there is also one important point I want to add, final point, is that we do not want to claim that I come from a different madhab or school of thought. This is wrong in economics. Why? Because you see, in your house, if you are Shafi'i or Hanbali or Hanafi, you can pray in any way you want. But when you go to the masjid, you follow the imam. This is a social activity. So economic activities are social activities and must be done according to consensus. And this calls for comparative fiqh, not just for one school of thought. And this is directed to all the 8 schools of thought that I know of. Forget about your school of thoughts when you get into Islamic economics.
Okay, thank you, Professor. We have another question, Nurizal Ismail. Yes.
Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Prof. Nikemetin, for the opportunity asking the question to Professor Mabit Ali. Yeah, I think I would like to thank first to Prof. Mabit Ali for the beneficial insight on Islamic economy. So I would like to ask you regarding the suite methodology on how we develop Islamic economy. That either we refer to the root of Islamic economy, which is the legacy or the Islamic tradition to us, from our ulama that you mentioned, like As-Saybani and others, early Muslim scholar, or we start from the neoclassical economy, and then we try to imbue the Islamic value and principle. So what is your opinion, Prof? I'm from Indonesia, from Tazkiyah Islamic University College. Thank you, moderator, Prof. Nikometin.
The answer to this simply, Brother Nurizal, is that we in Islamic economics, we have a non-textual science. We make theories and we use the Ibn Rushd approach of deduction in order to prove our theories. And then we go to the real world, collect data, and test those theories. This is Ibn Rushd induction. In these theories, we take Islamic values for granted. The rules that our Sharia scholars in Turath or in this heritage must be taken for granted, unless the judging them by consequences raises some issues. But as long as they do not raise any issues in ultimate consequences or ma'alat, we take them for granted and we make our analysis this way. So our analysis is based on the moral values from Sharia, but it's also based on economic analysis, which requires mathematical and statistical analysis. Thank you, Brother Ismail, for your question.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Al-Jarhi, and for your talk. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank you on behalf of the whole group and audience for your speech you gave to us today. So I think we will give like 10 minutes break and then continue with our first session. Thank you very much.